Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. My first degree was in creative writing, so writing poetry, like the least useful thing a person could possibly ever do. So
I don't agree, but
no, I'm saying this facetiously. Okay, but so I read basal dendrites, and to me, those two words are music, like basal dendrites. And do you want to describe the image, or do you want me to describe it?
Sure. I quite enjoy your description. So please,
Okay.
please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I love it. So the top third, I guess, is it looks like the BC rainforest. You see these gray trunks, just everything's flecked and mossed over with a bit of green, and you could see a bit of the leaves. So it's the trunk, like the gray, but you also have these like vertical, not too far away, but vertical trunks, and then in between, instead of seeing white, you see green, because it's like this. It's just this forest that seems it's quite open. The bottom 2/3 is just the exposed root system of these trees, and on it are probably the topsoil or the mulch of cedar and other kinds of trees. So it's very warm and brown. It's a stunning image. It's like just absolutely stunning. And this actually ties into another guy I spoke to, Adrian Bejan, who talks about why is it that, for example, the water system, the river system of a delta look like a lung, which look like a tree, which look like the trunks. So then when I see these basal dendrites, what a beautiful thing to say, basal dendrites. It echoes that. It looks like a brain. It looks like a heart. It looks like not like a heart, but like a lung. What does this image signify for you?
Yeah, well, I think you actually happened right on it with the part of the fractal notion of it, as you were describing, that your other guest was on about seeing these similarities of pattern. But you know what, on at first blush, it's just the sort of geometric richness of the image. It's just, again, one of those ones walking along a trail. This was to China Beach, which you may have visited in your time in British Columbia. So, it's just this visually arresting, kind of sight as you turn a corner on the trail. But there's another level for this for me, which is that a great deal of the work that I did when I was in grad school was we had a mouse model of a disease, and inside the layer 5 pyramidal neurons of the neocortex, we actually had this transgenic mouse that expressed a fluorescent protein in these pyramidal cells. And these are the ones, so if people were to imagine the kind of canonical image about what a brain cell, like what a neuron looks like, it would be the layer 5 pyramidal cells. And it's because they really look like trees.
Right.
They look like these trees.
Oh, wow.
So I actually spent probably a year of my life, doing 3D confocal fluorescence microscopy, taking, these three-dimensional, almost like a stack of pancakes, of layers of these digital images of these fluorescent neurons, and then tracing them in 3D, of just sitting in darkened rooms. And so, and actually literally tracing what are called the basal dendrites. So, these neurons they've got sort of like their main trunk. Okay. So they've got the cell body, they've got the main apical dendrite, and they've got these branches up at the top, and then they've got these things which look more like roots. Right? And it's what allows them to, intercommunicate with their neighbors, to connect to other parts of the brain, et cetera. And so having spent, literally a year of my life staring at these things, these tiny, tiny little cells, and then seeing this pattern recapitulate, it's exactly like what your other guest was describing. This notion of, there's this fractal patterning that happens where you're seeing across disparate timescales the same sorts of structures repeating. And yeah, I think that's probably the first pass level of what draws me into the image. And then the next aspect of it comes from a feeling that I would often get being in forests, and which was, layered upon from the studies that I did in grad school, like being inside a brain.
Okay.
So it's like, to actually extend the fractal notion, what a forest, it's like the quality of a forest is like being inside a neocortex.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There was a film in the 60s. I can't remember. I think it was called Fabulous Journey, or The Wondrous Journey. I can't remember the title of it. But some scientists they get miniaturized and injected into a.
Oh yeah.
So attempting to expand one's, sensitivity or perceptual awareness to, maybe feel what it's like if the brain, if a forest was a brain.
Right.
If in fact these things are, if trees are like neurons, and this thing is a collective system which is engaged in information processing just on timescales, not of milliseconds, but, of years or decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, just to kind of bathe in that, entertaining that idea, and get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Okay, so one of the great things about, so for example, philosophy, right? So I have a friend here in Hong Kong who teaches philosophy, and he likes to take his class on walks. And the idea being that on a walk, you can let your mind kind of freely associate and all this stuff. Okay. Pulling it out over to British Columbia. When I say it, I have to say it with falsetto. Okay, so the forest out there is, it's a rainforest. It's a bit cool. But what's great about the image is that when you look at it, you can see that, well, there's no real trail to walk through it. And it does look like this mass of organic and sure, like, okay, so of course, if you look at it as an image, the first surface, yeah, it's trees and exposed roots. But as you say, if you look at it from, through another glass or another perception or another step, it could very well be these dendrites, right? And there's something kind of interesting about walking through there, right? Which BC's forests are so big and epic, and as you walk through it, it's, I think, unlike other forests, certainly, in Ontario or Quebec or anything, or Hong Kong, let alone Hong Kong. The thing about BC forests is that you really feel their aliveness in a way that, like there's this notion of going and hugging trees, which sounds so flaky. It sounds like so like, oh, come on. And it's not that I necessarily hug trees, but when you walk through these forests, you really feel the bigness of it. And I can absolutely connect with you walking through there and then turning your head and then looking at that and just saying like, well, it's just leaping out at you saying, look, here I am. Like, this is like, make that connection because it's so clearly evident.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I actually have a lot of sympathy for a religion like Shinto, where you've got this, which I suspect I'm not an expert in this, but probably most traditional cultures have this animistic notion, which we could deconstruct scientifically. It's like, sure, this is what human brains do, where they because we're evolved to attribute selfhood to each other because we're a social species. Sometimes our brain can generalize that to, other, what we might call, inanimate or vegetative objects. So we might ascribe, beingness to a river or to a tree or to a mountain, something like that. And of course, view that as a kind of confusion or delusion, right? It's an overgeneralization of something which is actually functional and useful when we apply it to each other. But I don't know if you're familiar with Marie Kondo. She's became quite popular in the last couple of years about how to organize your home. How to fold your socks in your sock drawer.
Is she the one who, like, you touch something and then if it
that's
doesn't?
Right. Yeah,
okay,
that's right. And you basically, so in a way, it's kind of like modernized Shinto as I see it. It's quite animistic. It's like if you're going to figure out how to fold your sheets, you kind of have a conversation, with it and with yourself, and ask your socks how they want to be stored,
Yeah.
in your sock drawer.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, from a scientific perspective, absurd. Your socks don't care how they're folded, but I think it has very interesting effect. It has very interesting cognitive effects. If you approach life as though all of the things with which you're interacting are in fact, you can ascribe a kind of beingness to them. There's the heuristic effect of that is that it just changes how you live. Right? You just become much more sensitive and respectful. And when you start to, for example, move through a forest, I think arguably there's the absurdity becomes of taking that stance becomes less and less. Where you can come up to a tree that was there long before you were born and which is going to outlive you. That you can have a sense that this is kind of an autonomous being. It doesn't have a mind like yours, but it has something. Yeah. And you can relate to it in a very different way from that perspective. Almost the way the way cells within a multicellular organism might relate to each other. It's like, you're a neuron and I'm a white blood cell, but we're all in this. Right. We're all in this together. Yeah.
Okay, so let me throw a question into the pool and see what ripples we can spot. In the photograph, because you're walking around, and I have this feeling and this sense that when we get all of this information, and then our brains kind of perk up or connect or kind of stop. So you had the whole motivation to stop walking, to lift up the camera, to make the photo from there. Now, what's interesting when you look at the image is that in the whole image, it's all browns and greens and blacks, yet and the brown is kind of a warm brown, but it's not too neutral, but it's a brown. But in the whole image, there's this one little dot on this one little tree that's right far away. It's like, it must be a small sign, and but it's bright orange / red, fluorescent, and it's in the image itself, it's probably less than 0.1% of the image surface, right? So when you look at the picture, it's kind of like if you look at the rule of thirds or whatever, it's in the top, third quadrant. There's this one little red thing that your eye gets pulled towards.
Just leaps towards it. Yeah.
So here's a question for you. Do you think that placement was conscious, or was it a happy accident?
When I took the photo?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's very conscious. So
great.
For when I take a photograph like this, I'm sometimes a bit of a nightmare to go on hikes with because, suddenly it's like, okay, you go ahead, and I'm just going to I'm going to take, 50 photos, and I'm lying in a ditch somewhere or, standing on my head, and just to try to get the composition perfect.
You sound like a photographer to me, man. I don't care what you say. You sound like a freaking committed photographer.
Well, I think once you see it, and I think probably one of the more painful things about taking pictures, even on my phone, is that sometimes I just can't get it. I can see the thing. But I can't position the camera in such a way that I can capture in the photograph what I can see. Right. And that hurts. It's like there's this beautiful, extraordinary thing you want to share. And it remains, this thing which is just for you and just for them.
I think that sentence, a beautiful, extraordinary thing you want to share. I don't know, man. I mean, that, for some reason, those words coming out of your head make sense to me. Okay, I connect with that.
Yeah.
So for your students, into a classroom which is mostly functional, right, which is a competence-based class, how do these ideas ever get folded in? Because in a way, I'm assuming that part of what you're doing as an instructor is you're kind of raising them to kind of go one step higher and further. And, if we look at it in terms of human advancement, right? So how do you elevate their consciousness to see in the way that you see?
I think of course there's the content you have to deliver, as that's, with what
Yeah.
you're mandated with, but at another level, it's there's something a little bit that goes a little bit like, okay, watch how I do this.
Okay.
Right. And you show by doing, it's a little bit like, you have children. So, you might imagine if, and maybe you've done something like this where you have to run across a fast moving stream by skipping from one stone to the next. And there's a certain mental state they have to get into, to work up the courage that, they're going to be able to do it, but they have to be in a state of motion, right? They have to commit.
Right.
They have to commit and then embrace what it is to move and flow through the thing.
Uh-huh.
And so I feel like that, in teaching, there's almost something like that. It's like, okay, so here's how I would work through this, and here's how I would see it. And then when I'm on the other side of the stream, I turn around and I say, show me,
Right.
show me how you do it. And then we can then have a very interesting dialogue about where sometimes I learn from them too.
For sure.
Right? There's some new way, in their unique expression of how they see the world and how they approach things, where we now are starting to teach each other. And I think that is probably the most significant thing of all, where they get a feeling of not this hierarchical relationship of, being, the teacher and the taught, but rather, sort of co-participants or co-explorers of how to navigate life.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably how we might try to fold some of that into the day to day.
David, seriously, so good. Look, I love these conversations because they can they can go in any direction, and I love the sort of the magic that people bring, and when you send me the pictures, they're great, and I love how you think.
Well, I think you're doing a kind of a magical thing here too. Drawing all of these, weaving some very disparate strands together from all over the world, and I think it's quite remarkable.
Oh.
So.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if it's look, you just keep making images, and I will have you on. And if I think I was sort of, I got a whiff of maybe you'd want to start a podcast. I think you should, because I really do think you have a very interesting way of expressing yourself.
Well, there's nothing, conversations like this are probably, one of the things that I enjoy most, out of life. So.
Right. I think maybe you and I should start dating.
Well, it's a new millennium.
Okay, Dave, thank you so much, man.
All right. Thank you,
have
man.
a great day.
This was great.
Yeah.
Take care.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.